pandemic has got to be brought under control before you really see, I think, a recovery on our ability, notwithstanding, some of Brett's points. So pandemic is the other P.
Very good point. Very good points. Angela, I think we have another question from the audience, or?
We do. We have a great one coming in here. This one is with respect to the WTO. And it says, recently, some people have suggested we pull out of the World Trade Organization. How important is a rules-based system to international trade? And how important is it to have an organization like the WTO that can help mediate disputes?
Well, let's turn that one. I'm actually going to go right to Eric with that one. That's the topic come up, and I know a lot in your sector.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit about it. I think the point here for us, we want to build strong relationships and really work as industry to reduce trade restrictions globally. So we want to be supportive and building those relationships with our global partners to create certainty in the market. And we think that's important no matter who we're interacting with at this point in time.
Very good points. Chris, you were nodding your head there. I'm going to turn to you.
Well, I think that it's really important that we have the WTO to make sure that we do have fair and even trade. And I think that you see the administration has tried to do some things like that to make sure that we are trying to be on fair playing field. And so I think that it's an important organization to really make sure that we're on an even playing field as we move forward. Whoever the organization is, however we do trade, it has to be fair and free, and we need to be able to let the market bear it. And and to me, it's we need to be able to make sure, especially in agriculture, to be able to feed the world and make sure people aren't hungry. There's other issues from the manufacturing and all that probably I don't understand as well as I need to, but we have to make sure that it's fair and it's as free as possible to make it an equal playing field.
Right. Ross, I'm curious too, from your perspective. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about, the appeals courts with the WTO and just having all of those systems in place. How, from your perspective, how important is that multilateral venue for discussion?
I think it's very important. I think that we can enter into an agreement, and we'll look at the pluses and minuses and follow that agreement. You'll have other partners who will look at it and say, what are ways of getting around certain pieces? And if you're put at a competitive disadvantage, and you have to have someone to be an ultimate arbiter, and we need, you want to get your products into the most markets possible. And even if there's an agreement that says it should go in, all of a sudden there's sort of hidden barriers for entry, and you need someone to help arbitrate. And if China is violating the WTO, you want to be able to have that conversation with them, or if another country is. And if you just accuse them blindly, I'm not sure it gets that far. And so you have to have someone behind you. If you have multiple countries behind you that are saying there's a violation, you have a much better chance of success.
Yeah, and I think in the dispute resolution perspective, the U.S. has come out ahead more times than not when we've taken some cases there. Unfortunately, there's been a few notable exceptions, but for the most part, that has been helpful, I think, for us to resolve that. One of the other questions that came up that I wanted to ask is the importance of a workforce for our continued competitiveness in the global world market. Specifically, has a lack of predictability for immigration or guest workers created any challenges for all of you, or do we have an adequate technical support network for farm and ag businesses in Pennsylvania? Brett, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that. I mean, and I think there's two sides of it. There's what we hear from our producers that we work with. They're not getting the, which is actually can be a positive because then we can automate more and then provide, solutions. We have to advance our automation. They're not getting the workers, and it's becoming complicated. And, I do a tremendous amount of business in California in the grape market. In the wine market, we sell a fine machine that harvests grapes as good as they could be handpicked. And we're seeing more and more people demanding them. So this year we're delivering a lot on rental and a lot of, and we're talking about the large vineyards, and they're calling to say we're having a real trouble with manpower. And then they had all that smoke the other day. I just saw some stuff come across my desk, and they're like, we're deploying all these machines immediately to help them. They don't have the workers. And then when you talk to them when you're out visiting, it's astonishing the cost they're paying for the migrant workers, which that's fine. I mean, that's, they're happy to pay it, but it is like $40 an hour all in by the time they feed them, house them, and pay their wages, etc. So that's an issue, and they need those workers in order to make their economy go. So I think that's a challenge. They're the unskilled, I hate to say unskilled, but they are the unskilled labor. Then there's the skilled labor. And the biggest gripe, I would say, I hear from my dealers, our distributors who are on the front lines, is they can't get mechanics. That there's not trained mechanics that go into middle America anywhere and actually perform the task of keeping this highly sophisticated machinery running, which is essential, especially talking about a combine that's going to run 2 or 3 weeks. And if it goes down, that's quite a problem. So we've really been trying to reach out to the technical schools and do more and more, but we must find ways to invest there because these jobs are just not attractive, apparently, to the current generation of people graduating from these. There's just not enough people graduating from these tech schools and moving into these positions. So I think investment there is absolutely critical if we're going to be able to sustain our businesses across this country.
Thank you. Kelly, how has it been for you from a labor standpoint and workforce?
So it's funny, as soon as you said mechanics, that's kind of a key word because in our industry for manufacturing and production, a highly skilled mechanic is just kind of like gold to us. I mean, most of the time we end up almost kind of poaching them from another company because there's just not a lot to choose from. So the more that we can invest in education to get those skilled workers, because again, a lot of our production is now automated and we need those really technical skilled workers to come in and be able to run the equipment and run the production equipment. And just like he said, if one piece of our equipment goes down, our whole line goes down. So it's really important to have those skilled mechanics and workers that really can work on the technological pieces that we have.
The irony on the machinery side, the end machinery side, just to complement that, is actually the machines have become so self-sufficient in many ways that you don't need necessarily sophisticated operators. I always tell a quick story. I was out in Oregon visiting the largest grass seed producer in the world, exports a lot to China, Japan, a lot to Asia. And I saw behind his desk a picture of these young people all standing by the combines, and I thought it was his family. And he said, "Yeah, some of them are my family, and they're running all the combines." They were college students, and they were his daughter's friends. And he brings them in for the college, and they run the combines. So the combines have gotten to the point where they can pretty much self-operate for the most part in most applications. And I think that's a great step forward. But the person to fix it, boy, that's the one that we can't find.
Secretary Redding?
Well, I mean, I really appreciate this question on the workforce. I mean, to answer your question directly, certainly there were, some issues on the front side of the year back in the early days of, February, March, when, a lot of the applications for H-2A workers were due and some uncertainty, but I think that has sort of worked itself out. But I think the problem is much bigger, of course. We know that as one of our major concerns for agriculture is that, the continued competitiveness of agriculture is predicated on a skilled workforce. And you can innovate, and certainly we have done that, but we also understand that we're in a labor intensive business. And just putting that on our to-do list because of workforce issues or economic development issues. In the state, we've done a couple of things. I always describe the workforce as sort of as a tier, a pyramid, and think of it as the, you've got these production workers that are skilled, by the way, and then you've got up the pyramid, you've got the technical workers that may not be the production workers, they may not be the engineers, but they're really solidly in that center. And then the top of the pyramid is the engineers and management and folks who are looking at the science side of all of that pyramid is critical, and it has to be sort of addressed. To Brett's point, and a really good initiative here in the state several years ago, partnered with New Holland and some of his dealers in Pennsylvania and some other companies to develop a service technician program. To go directly to the question of, you've got to recruit and be very intentional about bringing these folks in. Hope is great, but hope's not a plan, right? Getting them in a pipeline that says we want to train them and offer them jobs and pay them, and we want them to work in New Holland or work in one of our other ag equipment dealers. We felt like that was really a page out of the manufacturing sector in our state. Borrow that page, it's worked well, because that's where we need to focus as an industry to be very intentional. So great question.
Thank you. I'd like to turn over to Angela. I think we have a couple of folks teed up to ask some questions. Angela?
We do. Thanks, Constance. So first we have Jaime Castaneda, who is the National Milk Producers Federation. So Jaime, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thanks, Andrea, and also with the U.S. Dairy Export Council. And it's great to see Secretary Randy and, of course, many of our partners in the dairy industry like Kraft Heinz and Hershey, and, of course, Pennsylvania dairy farmers. I mean, the whole, obviously, the whole goal of these AgTalks were about trying to change the tone of the conversation with respect to trade. Last time, there was a lot of trashing of trade, trashing of TPP, and so on. So I have twofold questions. First, despite USMCA passing with record number of votes, passing a trade agreement here in the United States is extremely, extremely difficult. And why is it so hard for the two parties is to try to understand the benefits of trade. Well, in Europe, which is a very protectionist country, continues to actually expand and get into more and more trade agreements, creating barriers like geographical indicators, preventing us from selling Parmesan or other products into international markets. Isn't that we're losing the whole policy, international policy, trade policy against Europe? I mean, isn't Europe, I mean, dominating the language, the precautionary principle, the text of trade agreements as opposed to us?
Let's go to Ross with that question. Ross?
You know, it's a very, Jaime, it's a very good question. I think that in order to deal with, let's say, the geographic, the Parmesan question, I think you have to be engaged. You have to be talking. You have to be you have to be at the table. Otherwise, we do get blocked. To me, it's really important to be part of that discussion and challenging. But I think the Europeans have been quite successful at it, and it's a big block. I mean, when you look at the EU, it's a huge, powerful block, and it's I think we have to be there, and we have to fight it tooth and nail. But if you just try to pull away from it, I think it's a bad strategy.
We have others. Chris, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I guess from my perspective is that when you look at as we go about the trade part of it, And when we try to do things, it's the same thing with immigration. You know, from a farmer's perspective, as I sit here on the farm and I think about it, it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to have an immigration policy that would get us workers in, get us workers back out, and really to be able to make it work for agriculture or for any other industry whatsoever. But unfortunately, we kind of get, it seems like we get stuck between two parties who have two different ideas and can't come together. I mean, from the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau perspective, we've been working on trade as long as I've been a member of the Farm Bureau, which is a long time. And we keep pushing for people to come together to create something that is workable on both sides, and let's move it forward. But we can't seem to get that to happen. And I think trade is somewhat the same way, is that we have too many ideas with not people willing to compromise, come together, and to really make sure that it works for both sides, and it's fair, and it makes sense. And so we have to have strong leadership to really make these types of things happen. And you know, as I sit here at the farm, sometimes I just shake my head and I think, geez, I don't know why this is so difficult. But there is a lot of complex things that go into it. But I agree with Ross. I mean, we've got to be at the table. We have to be talking, and it's not something that we make the deal and walk away. It's a constant talk. It's a constant engagement. It's a constant kind of juggling and making sure that you're fixing those small issues when they come up, because it's just not something that you do and then, oh, it's done. Okay, walk away. Times change, industry changes, farming changes, the needs change. And so it's a constant conversation, and we really have to focus on just making it better, not just for us, but the world, because we got to come together. We're no longer, you know, we don't sit on our own little island. We're global. And we have to understand that that this is all of us together, and it's got to work.
Thank you, Chris. Angela, I believe we have a question coming up from Claire. Is that correct?
Well, actually, Claire is coming through as Jonathan Mack, and Jonathan is with the Office of Congressman User. So, Jonathan, we're going to turn it to you. Do we have you, Jonathan? We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. While Jonathan's coming on, in just a moment, I'm going to read one of the questions that just through.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we are. We can hear you now. You bet.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for this great discussion today. I just wanted to ask a quick question on behalf of Congressman User about the dairy provision specifically in USMCA, and what exactly the positive impacts of USMCA has been on Pennsylvania's dairy and agriculture sectors. And I'm interested specifically, I know there's been a lot of discussion about Canada implementing some of their responsibilities in USMCA. And so I just want to get your take on developments in Canada living up to its requirements, especially pertaining to dairy.
Secretary Redding, let's start with you on that question.
Yeah, I wish Jaime was still on the phone from the National Milk Producers and the Dairy Export Council. I think, to Jonathan's point, Congressman User's point, is just we negotiated hard. I think the dairy provisions, as we know, were one of the commodities, one of the areas that got held up high as both a need to renegotiate the NAFTA, but also as the outcome pointed to as one of the successes. The challenge, of course, and this has been mentioned several times, is that you have to follow through. I mean, you've got to make sure that those provisions are honored. And I think at this point, there is a big question mark as to whether Canada is actually honoring the agreement that they had said that they would. And here we are, well into this, and still not sure about their commitment to. They say they are, but I think there's a lot of disappointment, I'll just say, that that hasn't been realized as quickly as it should have been, given its prominence in the negotiations, and particularly pointed to by many as the success story of USMCA.
Thank you. Eric, do you have some comments on that regarding from Hershey's perspective?
Yeah, so as a food manufacturer who has manufacturing operations in Canada, US, and Mexico, it was critically important for the Hershey Company to see USMCA through. To Secretary Redding's point around adherence to the agreement, we will watch that very closely and work with our state and federal legislators on any challenges or restrictions that we see coming from any of the three countries. But it is important, it provides us confidence to manufacture product in all three countries, and we want to see more of that.
Very good point there. Kelly, as a buyer of a lot of dairy product, what's your view on it?
So, and we think the same thing. At this point, you just have to keep moving forward. You have to keep sitting at the table, and you have to keep engaging everyone in conversation. The second you see something that might not be going correct, you need to sit at the table and try and fix it. We have a very large one that we're going to try and get through for Canada. So step by step, though, we're going to keep engaging federal, state, local, everyone along the way as we go through to make sure that each of those new guidelines are followed.
Thank you. Angela, I'm going to go back to you for a question from the audience.
Yes, we're getting some great questions in the Q&A, so we're going to try to get through as many as we can today. If we don't get to you, we'll follow up with you, we promise, but we've got a couple in the pipeline. So this next one comes from Jeffrey Myers, who's VP at Mid-Penn Bank. And the question is for Eric Boyle at Hershey, that he's heard that U.S. sugar quotas artificially inflate the price of sugar. Any idea how much this cost me when I buy a Hershey bar?
Hey, so yes, we import sugar from global markets, and we also use U.S. sugar. We produce 85% of our chocolate bars here in the U.S., and we use an enormous amount of U.S. sugar. We maintain close relationships with all of our sugar suppliers, and really long-term partnerships provide us with the ability to be very competitive on the world market. So I don't know if I have a rough figure on what it costs incrementally, but we have very close relationships with our US producers and our global producers.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, there's probably 500,000 acres of sugar just in Florida between two companies, essentially. It's basically two companies, and then some smaller producers in Louisiana. But that's about it. But there's basically two main companies are the main suppliers. And they,
Eric, I will tell you, as a consumer, Eric, of chocolate, I think it's probably worth it because I really like those Hershey bars, especially during s'more season. So thank you, Brett. Those very good points on the acreage. Angela, our next question.
Yes, so the next one comes in from Mike Evie and asks, what role should the milk co-ops play in exports when considering the low value of Class 4? Is this not the sole purpose of a milk cooperative to achieve the highest price paid possible to its members? And is that not best done by matching supply of member milk with domestic profitable demand?
Okay, I'm not quite sure who to toss that one to. Does anyone want to volunteer or? Okay, Eric, you're off mute. I like that.
I think one of the comments here is, because we deal with many dairy cooperatives here in the U.S., and as we expand globally, it's critically important from a supply perspective that the cooperatives understand our capabilities and what we need to service the export market. So I think they play a huge role and are at the table at this point in time on what consumers need moving forward and how they can partner with a multinational company like Kraft or Hershey moving forward.
Gosh, if I would just add, I mean, I think to Mike Evie, and hello, Mike, I think the central question is sort of the role of cooperatives. I mean, they ought to be leading, in my view, and I think many of them are, as National Milk Producers and the Dairy Export Council numbers show. But I think to your central point of just being more aggressive in what the cooperative and cooperative members, it ties in with an earlier question, comments around sort of education. I think having members understand that international dairy market is worth about 17-18% of our total production. So we have a very central question, right? If you want to keep producing milk and keep pushing the boundaries, both as a state and a country and a per cow, however you want to measure it, you've got to find a place to put that product, right? Or it comes at a very serious cost, both in terms of economics and family activity, and of course the dairy industry. So I realize that's not a direct to the class 4 question, but I put the classes aside and just say from a cooperative, I view their role as one to maximize the opportunities for their members, wherever that is. If that's selling it to Hershey's, if it's selling it into, cheese, if it's moving powder around the world, that's what we want them to do. I think that's what they should be doing as a cooperative, and use the full power, by the way, of what is found in the Capper-Volstead Act, because I think that gives them a special place in what Congress envisioned many years ago as that bargaining and marketing tool to move product around the world. So great question. Thank you.
Very good question. Angela, what's our next question from the audience?
All right, we've got 2 more questions in the pipeline. So the first is, our steel and aluminum tariffs on the EU and our broader trade disputes have led to retaliatory tariffs on US whiskey, apples, other products. How important is that we get the EU trade dispute resolved?
Very good question. Ross, can I ask, have you tee up on that one?
Yeah, I think we need to. I look at U.S. agriculture as being very competitive. We can take advantage of export markets, and we need to, work on eliminating trade barriers. To me, we will flourish. There's more to be gained than lost. And I think, there had been some discussion about a broad deal with the EU, and that was probably about 3-4 years ago. And that it's a shame that it didn't pass, because it creates opportunities in multiple agricultural communities. So to me, it's crucial.
Chris, I'm going to toss that one to you from a producer standpoint too.
I was just getting ready to unmute. So, it's really important that we get these deals done. We look at USMCA when that deal was being tried to be put together for Mexico, Canada. And in the pork industry, we've seen a market reduction because of the tariffs and the stuff from Mexico, that we've seen other countries come in and take our market away because they could bring a product into Mexico cheaper than what we could because of the tariffs. And so you see, we have not got back yet to the all-time highs of what we were exporting to Mexico, even though we have the USMCA done. So it is really, really important that we fix these disagreements and these tariffs. And again, it's back to the table. It's about having that conversation, because someone becomes the loser of this. I understand you have both sides and you need to come together and fix it. But it does make a long-lasting impact with agriculture, especially because they know that's where they can hit us, and it hurts the most. Because that's our strong base economy of the United States is our agriculture, and so it's super important.
Thank you, Angela. I think we have 1 or 2 more questions.
Yep, and we're going to do a little bit of a speed round on these. The first is coming from Phil Gerber, who is with the media, and asks, other than China, Canada, and Mexico, what countries provide the greatest opportunities for expanding Pennsylvania ag exports? And then a tag-on question is, what are your thoughts about potentially re-entering the TPP?
Okay, let's take that first one. Give me one country answer. Secretary Redding, you were off mute, so okay. Oh, you're back on mute. Sorry about that.
But one country answer.
Yep.
Let's go to Brazil.
Excellent point. A lot of potential there. Eric?
India.
Ross?
Yeah, I'd go with what Secretary Redding said, Brazil.
Brazil? Chris?
I would say South America as a country.
You're going to cheat and do a whole continent.
I'm doing a
Okay.
whole continent because
Kelly?
that's where it's at.
That's
I'd
it.
say India.
India. And I think Brett is catching up on something. We're going to let go. And then TPP, yes or no? Chris?
Yes, we need to re-engage.
Ross?
Yes.
Eric?
It doesn't matter, multilateral or unilateral deals, just get them done.
Get them done. Secretary Redding?
Yes.
Yep. Kelly?
Yes.
Yeah, that's been a sentiment I've heard a lot in the ag community. And so, Angela, are we good to go?
We've got a last very quick question, and maybe we can just
Okay.
have one of our panelists answer this one. This just popped in. It comes from April Niver. It says, what systems could have helped farmers adjust to the need to change buyers as we saw was needed due to the failures in the supply chain due to COVID-19? For example, would have helped to have more co-ops or food hubs. How do we plan ahead in the future as many Pennsylvania farmers lost sales?
Ross, can I turn to you for that one? I think that would be an interesting one. And then Chris, very quickly.
That's a tough one. It was such a disruption that to lose. I think this is more COVID related than trade related, but to lose markets, you have to be very nimble, and you have to be willing to you have to change your approach to market. And I wish I had an easy answer for that one, but I don't.
Thank you, Chris.
So I think that we have to look at other opportunities for processing. One of the things that we found is that, especially in the pig industry, our processing has been really kind of globalized, and in Pennsylvania, the biggest probably purchase that I've seen so far is that folks are buying animals and processing them themselves, and that there's a need for more processing, and we have to have a plan for how we're able to move our products to be able to keep that line of protein going throughout the system to make sure that we don't have this happen again.
I'm going to get in trouble with the organizers because this is a really important question. And Brett, I'm going to turn that to you for a quick answer on that, real quick, if I can as well.
On the same question or a
Yes.
different question?
Yes, same question. Sorry, on the supply chain.
I think I mentioned it before, but I hear all kinds of people with pontificating about, oh, we need to make major changes in the supply chain and this and that, and unwind the global economy, and that's unrealistic. We need to work. This is a traumatic event, and we all suffered from it, and we have to work through it. And like I said before, I said I know in North America, I can give you our perspective. I export much more than I import from Canada, or I only have one factory in Canada. I have one factory in Mexico that makes one or two products for us and some components. So we export much more there than we do. So for us, USMC was really critical. And I understand there's probably other companies that are the exact opposite. We need those supply chains. I think there's more work to be done. The learning for me and for the organizations is when crisis comes like this, and maybe there'll never be another one like it, but beyond just the trade agreements, there has to be, because the trade agreement didn't help with getting the supplies across the border when they closed the borders. Now, Canada's borders have been open for product, no issues whatsoever. Mexico, that hasn't been the case. It was tough. And I think, as most people know on the phone, almost all wiring harnesses come from Mexico. Foundries, as the American business or industrial footprint changed, and there's very few foundries left in the U.S., they moved to other countries. And a lot of it because they couldn't get American workers to work in the foundries. So we need that. And if we think that they're going to come back and work, well, then we need an immigration to bring the people back and build these foundries. But it's not realistic. So there's just more to it. And we get a lot of equipment from Europe. We also send a lot of equipment to Europe. And we have noticed with their, and I think Secretary Redding hit it perfect. There's two sides to this story. Europe got their factories up and running a little faster. They went hard first and shut everything down, but those factories are flowing better than ours right now in North America.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens. They're all on vacation in August, so they probably everything will change in September. But you know, but so I don't, we don't know the answers, but we got to get this thing under control, and we got to get cranking again. I just I get emails right and left that and then what happens with and then you have to first and foremost is the employee safety. We're not in our offices. Very few of us engineers have to go in. Our factory folks have to go in.
Right.
And we have all these precautions, spacing out but then all of a sudden someone gets sick because they went to get pizza one night with their family or something. Just crazy stuff. Well, then you got to quarantine the whole section. It's really a challenging time for everybody. And we're just got to work through it and learn. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give all of you an excellent opportunity. This is our lightning round, and I'm going to give you an opportunity. So imagine it's time for it's January 21st, 2021. You're invited to a meeting with the President of the United States, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader. So whether you're sitting across the table from a President Trump or a President Biden, a Senate Majority Leader McConnell or Schumer, what's the one thing you would ask them to do immediately to help boost American ag export? So let's start with Chris.
Well, I'd be in awe, first of all, being with the presidents, whichever one it is. But, my first thing is that we're in a global world, and we need all the help we can get to unleash our ability to be able to feed the world in any way possible. And we got to get markets opened everywhere.
Thank you. Ross?
Reduce tariffs and fight to eliminate barriers. So really open up trade.
Excellent. Eric?
Continue to build strong relationships and promote the food and beverage sector.
Very good. Kelly?
To keep the open dialogue going, we need to keep communicating and really help to increase that demand for U.S. products.
Good. Brett?
Free and fair trade. Agreements have to be bilateral. They have to be fair for both sides, because otherwise no agreement works.
And you get the final word, Secretary Redding.
Yeah, if I have the privilege of being at that table, I'll say two things. One, resolve the COVID-19 issues. And number two is, I think, cooperate with foreign governments to show how trade can be a win-win, not by taking a bigger slice of the pie, but instead making the pie larger. And remember, we're in the food business. Thank you.
Thank you. They all have their elevator speeches ready, folks. We all should have those, I think. Well, thank you for that to all the panelists. Before we close out this AgTalks town hall, I believe we have the results of our two audience polls. Angela, can you tell us how people responded to those?
Absolutely. So we're going to share these results now, and thanks for everyone for participating. Also, before I share the results, April, who just asked that great question, is with Congressman Cartwright's office, and she also gave a special shout out to you, Dave Williams. So thanks, April, for asking that question. So our poll results. Number one, which of the following actions should be the top priority for the next administration to boost U.S. food and agriculture exports? At the top of the House is repeal tariffs and reduce the burden of tariffs at 41%. Next, we have re-enter the Trans-Pacific Partnership at 20%, negotiate new bilateral agreements, 18%, negotiate new multilateral agreements, we heard a lot about that today, 25%, negotiate new sanitary, phytosanitary, or labeling standards at 18%, finish those existing trade agreements, really important, 34%, and enforce existing trade agreements, which is 30%. So thanks for that feedback. And we've heard that certainly that question of tariffs at the top of the list throughout our town halls as well. Number two, what are the most important functions of the World Trade Organization? This is a multiple choice. At the top is resolving trade disputes with 64%. And then coming in after that is harmonizing trade relations with trading partners at 43%, serving as a forum for trade negotiations at 32%, monitoring trade policies at 23%, administering WTO trade agreements 18%, and then providing technical assistance and training for developing economies at 11%. So thanks everyone for that great feedback. I'm sure we'll continue to have these conversations, and we appreciate you all joining us today. Constance, back to you.
Thank you, Angela. Very interesting results to those questions. I'd like to thank the audience for responding to those poll questions, and thanks to our panelists for such an informative and vibrant discussion. Let me turn the microphone back over to Dave, who's going to close out our program. Dave?
Oh, well, thank you, Constance. And I want to thank you for all the work you do for agriculture throughout the years and, of course, our industry, and for helping to moderate today's virtual town hall. It's been a great conversation. We learned a lot about what people think out there in this great world of ours. And we covered a lot of ground today, from discussion about new markets, customers, tariffs, their impact on American farmers, to discussions about how we can strengthen our supply chains. I want to thank for this moment, and to thank the Constance Coleman, our panelists, and our audience for great discussions today. This really was an all-star lineup. I'd like to also thank AgTalks sponsors, including the National Corn Growers Association, National Milk Market Producers Federation, U.S. Dairy Export Council, Farmers for Free Trade, Corn Refiners Association, Plant-Based Products Council, and the CAECO ISOM, World Strategies, and Fresh Produce Association of Americas, North American Meat Institute, and American Farm Bureau, along with the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. Thank you all for making this conversation possible through your generous support. On behalf of Pennsylvania Farm Country Radio and American Farm Country Radio, I want to thank all of you for participating in today's talks. The next Ag Talk Town Hall will be held in partnership with the National Milk Producers Federation and U.S. Dairy Export Council at 11 Central on Tuesday, September 1st. I encourage you to register for the Wisconsin Ag Talks Town Hall at www.agtalks.net. We thank you all for your time today, and please stay safe and tune in to Pennsylvania Cable Network to watch this town hall in its entirety. I'm Dave Williams.